On my 16th birthday, it was pouring rain in Columbus, Ohio. I stood in the living room, holding the tiny cupcake they had given me, telling myself that maybe this year would be different. Then my father opened the front door, looked me straight in the face, and said coldly, "You're old enough. Get out. We're not raising useless trash anymore." Behind him, my stepmother smirked. My half-sister, only 14, crossed her arms and shouted loudly enough for the neighbors to hear, "Just leave already. Stop making the house stink." There was no argument, no chance to explain, not even a birthday wish. The door slammed shut, the lock clicking like a final full stop. I walked through the rain until my shoes were completely soaked, then slept on a park bench. I started memorizing which shelters would turn minors away after 9 p.m. I learned what hunger feels like when you're desperate enough to dig through trash for something still sealed. And I understood one thing clearly: no one was coming to save me. I wasn't thrown out of the house for no reason. Everything had started years earlier, when I was only 5. My mother died in a car accident. And from that moment on, there was an emptiness in the house that no one wanted to talk about. Instead of holding me close, my father ran from his grief and married another woman after only a short time. My stepmother, Cheryl, came into our home with a falsely gentle smile, but within a few months, I had become a thorn in her side. She often said I looked just like my real mother, and coming from her, those words sounded like a curse. Then my father fell into gambling. He lost everything, sold off the furniture piece by piece, and eventually lost his job. Every time creditors called, Cheryl would turn on me and pour out her anger, as if I were the reason the family was falling apart. My half-sister, Michaela, grew up hearing nothing but cruelty, seeing me as a freeloader, and always waiting for a chance to humiliate me. By the time I turned 16, they had only one decision left: to erase me from their lives. The first night on the streets, I thought I could handle it. I kept telling myself that if I could just survive a few days, everything would be okay. But reality was far more brutal than I had imagined. I slept on a soaked park bench, huddled in a thin jacket, listening to the wind howl through the leaves. Every time I heard footsteps, my heart raced. I had no way of knowing whether it was a kind stranger or someone about to take the last few things I owned. By morning, the hunger twisting in my stomach made me move like a shadow. I tried going to a shelter, but they looked at my papers and shook their heads. Minors need a legal guardian. I had no one. So I started learning how to survive, where to find public water fountains, when supermarkets threw out expired food, and how to stay alive on a half-eaten loaf of bread pulled from a trash bin. Some days, all I managed to eat were a few cold fries. Some nights, I was too afraid to sleep, scared someone might drag me away. I had never felt my life so small, like a child completely forgotten by the world. If you've ever witnessed or experienced that kind of abandonment, comment one so I know you're here with me. I was bent over, digging through a trash bin behind a convenience store, when a black SUV pulled up nearby. I flinched, thinking they were about to call security to chase me off. The car door opened, and a man in a suit stepped out. He moved calmly, but his eyes were sharp and serious. He walked toward me, looking at me as if he'd known me for a long time. I took a step back, my heart pounding, ready to run. But he didn't yell at me. Instead, he spoke softly. "Riley Sullivan?" I froze. No one had said my name like that in days. He introduced himself as Lawrence Hargrove, a lawyer representing a woman who had recently passed away. I thought it was some kind of scam. I had nothing left to lose anyway. Then he handed me a sealed envelope and said something that left me stunned. "You've inherited the entire estate of your great-aunt Beatrice Whitford." I could only stand there, my hands trembling, unable to understand how someone homeless like me could possibly inherit anything. Before I could even process the word inheritance, Mr. Lawrence opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of documents. He spoke very slowly, as if afraid I might misunderstand. "After taxes, Miss. Beatrice's estate is estimated at around $52 million. I laughed, convinced he had to be joking. 52 million? For someone so hungry she was digging through trash for food? It sounded completely unreal. But he didn't laugh. He simply showed me the official documents and a copy of the will. Every red stamp, every signature, every number sent a chill through me. Then he closed the folder, and said the most important thing of all. But you must meet one condition. I held my breath. The condition wasn't about doing some kind of work, it was about time. I had to be at Miss Beatrice's house in Cincinnati within 72 hours of receiving the notice. If I was even 1 minute late, the entire estate would be transferred to a charity that supports homeless youth. He looked at me expectantly. You need to decide right now. I knew I had only one chance. I had never been on a plane before, let alone a private jet. But just minutes after I nodded, Mr. Lawrence made a phone call, and everything happened so fast I didn't even have time to be afraid. They ushered me into the car without asking another question, as if they were afraid I might change my mind. I stared out the window as the streets where I had been sleeping faded into the distance, the trash bins, the dark corners, the park benches slowly disappearing behind me. Before boarding the plane, they took me into a small room at the private airport. There was hot water, clean towels, and a brand new set of clothes. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the person staring back, my face still smudged with dirt, my eyes exhausted, but for the first time in days, I was clean. When I finished changing, I stepped outside and saw the white plane waiting for me, its engines humming softly, almost like a whisper. On the flight, Mr. Lawrence handed me a sealed letter and told me it could only be opened once we were in the air. It was from Miss Beatrice. Her handwriting was shaky but clear, and the very first line made my throat tighten. Riley, I know what it feels like to be thrown out of your home, because I once was too. I gripped the letter, and suddenly my heart softened. This didn't feel like just an inheritance anymore. It felt like a message meant only for me. When I arrived at the large house in Cincinnati, everything felt unreal, like a dream I might wake up from at any moment. Mr. Lawrence led me into Miss Beatrice's study, where a chair and a screen were already set up. He said, "She left this video for you." I sat down, my palms slick with sweat. The screen lit up. An elderly woman with silver hair appeared, her expression firm yet warm. She spoke directly into the camera, as if she were looking straight at me. Riley, money is not a reward, it is a tool. She explained that the $52 million would be mine, but not without conditions. I had to prove myself worthy by doing what mattered most to her. Within 5 years, I had to help at least 80 homeless young people under the age of 21 find stable housing and gain access to education or a real profession. And most importantly, I couldn't just sign checks. I had to show up in person, walk alongside them, and help them truly get back on their feet. If I failed, everything would disappear, transferred to the charity forever. I held the pen in my hand, and it felt like I was holding my entire life. With just one signature, I could have an amount of money I'd never even dared to dream of. What made my hands shake wasn't the $52 million. It was the condition: 80 children in 5 years. I thought about the nights I'd slept in parks, the hunger so sharp it felt like pain, the feeling of being invisible, as if my existence didn't matter. And I understood that if someone had placed this opportunity in my hands, it wasn't so I could live comfortably on my own. So I signed. As the ink touched the paper, Mr. Lawrence let out a quiet breath, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He handed me the keys to the house, the legal documents, and said, "Tomorrow, you'll receive an initial operating fund of $5 million. You can begin." Actually, formatted. I looked around the massive house, but strangely, it didn't feel like it belonged to me. It felt more like a starting point for people who had never been given one. That night, I didn't sleep in fear anymore. For the first time, I fell asleep with a clear purpose: to bring the children out there into the light. If you want me to continue telling Riley's journey, how she saves each child, one by one, comment one and let me know. 5 years passed faster than I ever expected, but they were also 5 years spent racing against time. I didn't use the money to buy luxury. I used it to build a place where kids like the one I used to be could walk in and know one thing for sure: no one here will throw you out. I founded Beatrice's home, hired social workers, partnered with schools and hospitals, opened group homes, and created transitional apartments for teens about to age out of the system. I didn't just sign paperwork, I met every child in person. I sat and listened to stories of beatings, abandonment, and abuse. I personally took them to school, to hospitals, even sat overnight outside emergency rooms just to make sure they didn't disappear again. Among them was Levi Ortiz, a 15-year-old boy living under a bridge, his arm broken but his pride intact. Levi was one of the first kids I helped, and over time he became my right hand, the person who understood me better than anyone else. By the time the 5th year arrived, I had completed 79 out of 80. I was missing just one case to unlock the entire inheritance. I thought my past had stayed behind the door that slammed shut the day I was thrown out. But just as I was one case away from the finish line, Mr. Lawrence called me, his voice completely different this time. "Riley, your family has reached out." My heart stalled. I was silent for a long time before asking, "Who?" He told me my father had terminal stage lung cancer. No insurance, no money for treatment. Cheryl had left long ago, taking whatever was left with her. Michaela was addicted now, drifting from place to place, arrested several times for petty theft. As I listened, I didn't feel the immediate pity people might expect. Instead, a cold sensation ran down my spine, as if the past was reaching out, trying to drag me back into the pit I had fought so hard to escape. A few days later, they showed up at the gates of the center. My father looked gaunt, his steps unsteady, his eyes red with illness and desperation. Michaela stood behind him, her makeup smeared, the smell of drugs and smoke clinging to her clothes. My father looked at me as if I were his last life raft. "Riley, can you help me?" "Just this once." "It's Stadio Way." I looked at them, the same people who had pushed me onto the streets, and now they were back because of money. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stared at them for a long moment, as if looking at two strangers who once carried the name family. My father broke into a dry cough, his pleading eyes trying to soften me. Michaela hovered behind him, lips pressed tight, her gaze empty like someone who had grown used to failure. I took a deep breath and said calmly, "I can't give you money. I weigh." My father's face collapsed instantly. He stammered, "But I'm dying. You can't." I cut him off. "When I was 16, you threw me out of the house. Not a dollar. Not an apology. You chose to end that relationship first." I turned to the reception desk and brought out 3 folders I had prepared in advance. I placed them in his hands. One with instructions for enrolling in Medicaid and end-of-life medical support, one with information on rehab centers and temporary housing, and one listing organizations that could help them. "This is what I can give you," I said. "Not money, a path." My father's hands trembled as he held the folders. Michaela looked down, saying nothing. I signaled to security, "Please escort them out." Adamindadial. The gate closed behind them softer than I expected, yet as heavy as a final full stop. That night, I thought I wouldn't be able to sleep. Images of my father and Michaela kept circling in my mind like an old wound ripped open again. I sat alone in my office, staring at the numbers on the wall. 79 over 80. Just one case left. But I didn't want it to be just a number to complete a task. I wanted it to be a life truly saved. Close to midnight, the center's hotline rang. A staff member on duty rushed in and said something that made my heart jump. "There's a 15-year-old girl who was kicked out by her mother. She's standing at the bus station, has no money, and she's terrified." I stood up immediately. In that moment, I understood something clearly. Life always finds a way to bring a child to exactly where they need to be. When Destiny walked in, she was clutching a torn backpack, her eyes red from crying but still trying to look brave. I took her into a quiet room, poured her a cup of warm water, and said, "You're safe here now." Destiny broke down in tears, and I almost did too. I went back to the board, picked up the pen, and wrote her name on the final line. Destiny no more Beatty. Cheryl disappeared from their lives. She left when the money ran out, just as she always had, walking away whenever there was nothing left to gain. People said she tried staying with relatives, was asked to leave, and then drifted off, no one really knowing where she ended up. Michaela fell even faster. Addiction drove her into constant theft, and eventually she was arrested and sentenced to prison for repeat offenses. When I heard, I didn't feel happy or satisfied. I felt only a cold, simple truth. They had chosen that path themselves, just as they once chose to push me out of the house when I was 16. And this time, no one came to save them. I didn't use my story for revenge. I used it to build a new future not just for myself, but for children who had been abandoned like I once was. Beatrice's home was no longer just a small center. It grew into a full system of transitional housing, vocational training, mental health support, and scholarships. Children who once slept under bridges now hold keys to their own homes, have jobs, degrees, and most importantly, the belief that they are worthy of love. 1 year later, I was awarded Young Philanthropist of the Year. Standing on the stage, I looked out and saw familiar faces, kids who had once walked into the center trembling with fear, now smiling, confident, and steady on their feet. I said a sentence it had taken me years to fully understand. Revenge isn't sweet. Freedom is. And disaster. Levi stood beside me, my real, chosen family. And that day, I officially adopted him. I wanted him to know that blood does not define family. Family is the people who never leave you behind. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Sometimes, saving someone else is also a way of saving yourself.